Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're in a beautiful part of North Devon, running along the coast towards Clovelly, and today we're here to try out Speedgoat 5 by HOKA only for their first run. Plenty of technical terrain, hard stony trails, bit of grass, a bit of mud, a bit of everything to give these a good run through. So stick around for my first impressions review. Hello and welcome back to the channel. So today the Speedgoat 5 took it out for its first spin, a decent 15-mile stretch of the beautiful North Devon coastline with just about every kind of terrain, from compact stony paths to technical rooty and muddy sections, as well as some steep ascents and downhills to put this legend of HOKA's trail shoe lineup fully through its paces. I last ran in the Speedgoat 3, which I absolutely loved, except for the pretty narrow platform and toe box, and Rachel's been running in the Speedgoat 4 for some time now, which also suffers from the same problem. So when I heard that the Speedgoat 5 addressed that issue, my interest was piqued. So before I share my likes and dislikes, some quick technical specs. The heel-to-toe drop stays the same as previous models and is pretty low at 4mm. The depth of the Vibram lugs are 5mm, and it's a neutral trail running shoe. Named after multiple ultramarathon winner Karl Meltzer, the Speedgoat is styled to be that workhorse shoe over many miles of mud, rock and stone. So this is my first impressions review. I'll give my full review at around about 200 miles once we've fully put a lot of miles and different types of terrain under the shoe. But this is out of the box, quick first impressions, the first sort of run in them. And yeah, first up on the likes is the weight. Now this is the first thing that struck me out of the box. The shoe is much lighter than I remember the Speedgoat 3 being, and now sitting at 275 grams in my size, which is UK 7.5. It's a really decent weight for a trail shoe. It doesn't feel as big and as clunky as it looks, and finding that flow and rhythm feels easy with a trail shoe that's been on a bit of a diet since I last ran in them. Now HOKA are claiming that they've managed to reduce the weight by 15 grams per shoe, and if you're going from the Speedgoat 4 to the 5, that's definitely a big enough weight difference to notice. These are going to feel a lot lighter than your last pair. The Speedgoat 3 and 4 were just kind of plastered with these TPU overlays. Now, in the Speedgoat 5, HOKA have cut this back to the bare minimum, and along with a different configuration of midsole materials, they've made their weight savings as well as giving the upper a little bit more flexibility. Also, just worth quickly mentioning, the shoe felt ready to run straight out of the box. There was no kind of break-in period. The midsole is really flexible, pliable and comfortable straight out of the box from that very first mile. Okay, on to my second like, and we're going to have a look at the traction. And HOKA have tweaked this just a touch. In fact, you're going to need a kind of magnifying glass or something to really spot the difference here over the last pair. Now, on the Speedgoat 5, each lug has a series of small spikes. HOKA are calling this the Mega Grip, and I have noticed an improvement over the grip since I last ran in a pair of Speedgoats. I had some really technical and steep descents today, some wet, rooty sections, and a lot of compact, stony trail for the Speedgoat to contend with. In every scenario, it performed well, and even on the wet stone, which so many trail shoes suffer on, it held pretty firm. I like this innovation. It seems to make a lot of sense to me. With these barbs, these little spikes on each lug, they've increased the surface area of every single lug, which I'm guessing more surface area means more friction, and to me it seemed to work really well. So a good little innovation there. On to my next like. Now, finally, HOKA have addressed the issue that stopped me from running in the Speedgoat 3 and is starting to bug Rachel in the Speedgoat 4 as well. Now, and that's the width and the tightness around the toe box especially. In the 5, the Speedgoat is just a fraction roomier because they've got rid of the TPU overlays. The upper's more flexible around that toe box as well. I think it's ever so slightly wider, and as a result it's a far more comfortable ride over those longer distances. And the comfort improvements don't stop there. The new fully gusseted tongue sits flat against the top of your foot. It's padded in all the right places, and they've changed the shape to that almost snake-like forked tongue shape that I last saw on the Nike Next Percent 2. Kind of really nicely fits around the shape of your, the top of your ankle. Now, the midsole is a fair bit softer than the Speedgoat 3 and offers a really responsive ride whilst still protecting the sole of your foot from those sharp rocks. I was running over some really gnarly rocky sections today, and only once did I feel the impact of a sharp stone, and even then only barely. Now, this is a trail shoe you're going to put on, you're going to dial in the fit a little and then just forget about for the rest of your run, which is pretty much exactly how a trail shoe should be. Now, my final like just gives a little nod to the sustainability of the shoe. HOKA are using some recycled materials in the Speedgoat 5, and they're labelled as vegan, like all of HOKA shoes, which just makes purchasing the shoes so much easier. Leather isn't often found in running shoes, but some inks and glues are used in the manufacture of the shoes, and they're not always vegan friendly. Now, most shoe manufacturers are moving away from those animal-based glues and inks, but they don't always go to that sort of extra effort of making that knowledge public. So as a vegan, you often have to do a little bit of research and a bit of digging to kind of find out whether the shoe is vegan or not. So I appreciate HOKA making that job a lot easier for us. Okay, now on to my dislikes, and there's very little not to like about this trail shoe. I really had to think hard after the first run to pick out a couple of things that bugged me a little, but neither of them are really huge or deal breakers here. So, okay, something I noticed was that when tackling a very steep decline, I noticed more than once my foot was sliding into that toe box, just getting bunched up a little bit. Now, it's not an uncommon issue. I've experienced this before in other trail shoes. But in the Speedgoat 5, I just think the lockdown is just a touch on the loose side. Nothing crazy. I didn't notice this on more kind of typical descents, but on those really steep downhills where you have to kind of lean back to stop yourself from going too fast, I could feel that movement kind of just sliding into the toe box. Now, what was also interesting was that I could adjust that, kind of micro-adjust that, shift my foot to the back of the shoe whilst on the fly, while still going downhill. So that was pretty cool, but yeah, it wasn't long again until it was just kind of sliding and bunching up into the front of the shoe. I don't think it's a big issue. It's probably down to that little bit more flexibility in the upper and a little bit more room in that toe box, which over the long haul is going to be far more useful than a little bit of forwards movement on those very occasional steep hills, but just something to be aware of there. And then my next dislike is more of a user warning than a dislike really. If you generally prefer a more nimble trail shoe, one with a little less foam under the heel, maybe one that's a bit closer to the ground as I usually do, then take these shoes out for a couple of runs on smooth and not so technical trails first to get used to them. I threw them into the deep end today on trails that are just about as technical as you can get, and more than once whilst just lifting my foot over a root or a big rock, the lugs would just ever so slightly brush the obstacle, and they would just cause an extra bit of friction, just stop that flow a little bit. Now, clearly I wasn't used to lifting my feet that sort of fraction of a millimetre higher, and at one point as I was ticking along, there was this huge root across the trail. Clocked it, looked at it, knew I had to get over it, but somehow still managed to clip the shoe on top of that root, and ended up in a big heap, sprawled across the trail, and now nursing a grazed knee. So heed my warning, get used to them first, and then you won't end up with a cracked GoPro screen and a stressful few days watching your camera make its way back to Holland, or at least that's where I hope it ends up. One of the lovely benefits of Brexit is our returns outside of the country now have to have about 6 forms attached to the parcel, and despite this, it's still being held up clearing custom, so fingers crossed it comes back before Race to the Stones in a week's time. But anyway, back to the Speedgoat 5, and that's about it really for the dislikes. And although it's not the most earth-shattering update, it really didn't need to be, and I like this tinkering and the making of sort of minor adjustments to a shoe that's now in its 5th iteration. It's been around for a pretty long time. It has long been one of the best trail shoes on the market, and if it isn't broken, no need to fix it as far as I'm concerned. I like the extra traction on the outsole. The midsole is really comfortable, not as plush and squishy as it looks. The upper is flexible. The lockdown's pretty good. I was a little bit concerned about this heel flare thing at the back, but that didn't seem to cause any issues. Everything was pretty good, and as I remembered from the Speedgoat 3, a very good ride, very confident on the trails, and now just a bit more comfortable and a bit more grippy. If you've ran in a previous version of the Speedgoat, this shoe is going to look and feel familiar to you, but you're still going to notice those little tweaks, those gradual changes and improvements that they've made. If you've been running in the Speedgoat 4 for a while now, I think you're really going to enjoy the weight savings and the extra room in the toe box, as well as that more flexible upper. Thanks for watching, and until the next one, be the best you.